how to get through difficult life transitions. I'll tell you why I was inspired to talk about this topic tonight. And I think that so many of you can resonate. So I have been through a lot of challenges and changes and transitions in my life. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just give you kind of a very high level. So as a child, I immigrated to this country. So that was a transition as a kid from one part of the world to another part of the world. Then I had to move and live from, I lived in Boston, then I moved to New York City. So I had the transition of moving to a new city. Then when I was in college, I went to college, but I wasn't happy with what I was studying, and I ended up leaving my studies. And then I decided to go on a new profession, and then during COVID is really when I went through a true huge transformation as a person. So I've been through a lot of different transitions, and interestingly enough, I'm watching so many of my friends either going through divorce or death of a loved one, or endings, new beginnings. And so we're all going through transitions all the time. And what is a transition? A transition is change. Really, at the end of the day, that's what we're going through. And the thing about change is that it's really, really scary. Think about any time in your life when you've had to go through change, and how afraid were we going into that? And I think that when we talk about transitions and change, you can't stop but really examine what is the fear behind that change. And that is what I really want to delve into, is how do you overcome fear? Because that's what really is behind these difficult transitions in life. And so as we shine a light on this topic tonight, we're really going to start to peel away the layers of the onion around how do you overcome fear? Because that is what's behind all of it. And it's not only fear, there's also shame sometimes that comes with change. There's also self-doubt that can come up with transitions in life, right? And so there are all of these, but when we still look at what is self-doubt, or what is rooted in shame, what is rooted in all of this, that's still fear. And so at the crux of the heart of what we're going to talk about is, how do you overcome fear? How do you overcome fear? And let's share our own personal experiences as well as what we know around fear. So I will kick it off, and I will share some stories, and then I will turn it over to you ladies to share your stories and how you've been able to overcome fear in your life as well. So I have had to overcome lots of different fears. The biggest one was when I realized during COVID that I didn't know who I was. That was really hard. That was really hard. And when I started to question everything I knew to be true in my life. So whether it was my upbringing, whether it was the definition of me. So, I grew up believing that, it was society, it was my parents, it was others who defined me for who I was. And not knowing who I was when I started to realize that was really, really scary to me. And in fact, it was something that I continued to run away from for a really long time. I've shared here in the past that as I was going through this self-discovery journey, I believed myself to be really small. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but I really, the way that I used to see myself was this shy, good girl who was in this world to do what society told you to do, right? Like you go to school, you have children, you get married, right? Like you just go through these cadences in life. And then life shakes you to your core. Life shook me to my core. And some examples of the way that I continue to run away from myself was, I I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who was going through divorce, and she was mired in a lot of fear around how this divorce was going to go. So, for example, is he going, so she was making more money than he was, for example. So she was like, oh my God, is he going to take away everything that I've ever worked for? I have some friends who are going through divorce who are like, how is custody going to work? I had friends who had lost loved ones and didn't know how they were going to cope with the loss. And so these are all the different types of fears. Or, people who were getting divorced were asking, like, maybe I'll be alone for the rest of my life. What does that life look like? Right. And that's what I'm headed into. Right. So these are all the different types of fears that we encounter. And, my fears, I remember asking her, like, what kind of, what made you even think about getting divorced, right? And she said, Vicky, one day I woke up and I realized I really didn't like who I was. And when I would look into the mirror, I knew I didn't love myself. And I couldn't understand that concept. And I think I told the story here where I was like, well, I went home, I looked in the mirror and I was like, I still love this person, so all's well with the world, right? But yet I continue to have so many limited beliefs in the sense that, like, what is the life that I deserve to have? And my fear was not looking at at not seeing the limited beliefs that I had around me and who I was. Right? And continuously running away from having to look at myself. And so my fear was really facing me and having to potentially unravel everything I've ever believed about me and about this world and about life. So I'm going to pause here because I want to give everybody else a chance to talk about this. And we can continue to delve into this topic. And, we'll get into, well, what are some of the maybe practical applications, but as well as like the spiritual applications of being able to overcome these fears as you go through these transitions in life. So I am going to turn it over to you, Laura, and then we will go around in our usual circle.
Yeah, thank you. So I really love when discussions get deep and we can start to look at the reasons behind why are we so afraid of change? It's almost like we've been conditioned in our lives to be terrified of like anything that isn't what we're used to. And I actually remember hearing that our brains they're not wired to see the consistencies and what is constant and the peace and the grounding and what is the same all the time. We're actually wired to see what is different to protect ourselves. So if we wake up in the morning, we come out of our camp and something's moved, oh, there's somebody in our camp. And, for example, so that's the first thing I'd like to point out is I think that we're really afraid of change because some wiring, right? Some biological, there's something there that makes us feel threatened. But what I've learned is that we have to decide too whether or not we're going to believe and accept that the universe is friendly or not. And I can't remember who quoted that or who said that. So maybe it was Einstein. But he said, whatever you believe is going to be true. So if it's a friendly universe, everything happens for you and in your favor. And if it's an unfriendly universe, then everything is just questionable and you're probably going to feel, threatened and not life is happening to you and you're a victim to your own existence and all that stuff. So I think when we're going through difficult life changes, being aware that we are going to see the change, that's just what we're going to see. We're going to feel a little uneasy, but if we can continue to decide whether or not it's going to be a friendly universe or not, like those are really your two choices. That's the negative and the positive. That's the duality of life. And luckily there are only those two choices, because anything in between is going to cause too much chaos, too much internal chaos. So if you just choose one of those, I remember when I chose between fear and love. Do I want to live in fear or do I want to live in love? And it was a choice that I made, and then I dedicated myself to, and I had to remind myself every single day, oh yeah, I'm scared, but I chose love. I chose love. I chose love. And the more that I chose love, the more opportunity opened up for me. And I think that's applicable no matter what you're going through, whether it's retirement, a divorce, a spouse passing away, grieving somebody, a career change. If you can trust the process and the transition, it's going to be a lot easier, because I too, like Vicky and probably every single one of us here, we've all lived many years and we've all had many experiences. And I can look back and see how everything worked out for the better. Something taught me something, or something prepared me for the next level of my life. And it's never quite comfortable living in it. And that's why we're going to talk about the practical tools that you can apply to make it easier. But the interesting thing that I also wanted to add is that no matter what you do, you're going to get through it. You don't have, so tools to me are basically, they can help you cope. They can give you permission to feel good about what you're going through, but you're going to get through it even if you don't do any of that stuff. So what you're doing as you're traveling through the transition will just, make it a softer landing or a more peaceful, transition. But it is good to always have those coping skills and those tools in your toolbox for any time that something happens in your life, because that's one of the ways that we really try to encourage people to love themselves, is to have that toolbox and say, this is something I can pull upon at any time in my life. And then you can share it with others as well. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chrissy, and then, we'll just do our rounds. And I just really love the depth of the conversation to get deeper. So just a reminder, if you even want to share, any of our guests that are live, share specifically what you're going through in the chat, or you can raise your hand after about the first 45 minutes. And then we can touch upon that, because you may be going through something specific that we would really like to talk about if you mention that.
So really quickly, we're actually getting some really great commentary on the YouTube live.
Oh, cool.
And so I'll share that. So Chris is writing in, we like feeling safe and secure, so we prefer our comfort zones more, which is so true. And one of my favorite things to say in the world is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is actually one of the lessons that I was going to delve into. So thank you, Chris, for pointing that out. And then some more commentary. The future is unavoidable, so it's better to be ready for no matter what happens. Love what you said about tools and how you'll go through it no matter what, Laura. And self-love is like having your own back. You gotta be there for yourself before being there for others. It sounds cliche, but it's so very true. Love this commentary. So you nailed it.
I love it. I love it.
Yes. And welcome, Rosie. Thank you for joining. So let's keep going. I love this. I love this conversation. Okay, Chrissy, over to you. Sorry, I just wanted to share.
No, that's great. I love it too, because we want to interact with people. So everyone who's joining us right now, we commend you, because this is what we want to interact with people and share stories. So we think it's awesome. So that was great. Yeah. When we first came up with this topic, I didn't really know what I was even going to talk about, because I'm like, because the person I was a year or two ago to the person now, when it comes to like change and transitions, is someone completely different. You know what I mean? And I was also thinking, like, have I, I've always kind of lived in the same area, just different things like that. And I was like, well, we went through a pandemic, so we all went through a huge transition on that front. So, having said all of that, I love what you said about the thing is, our comfort zone, it's familiar, it's comfort to us. When I think about myself 2 years ago, I thought I needed to, the more I controlled what was going to happen, the more like, everything was going to work out fine, which is not the case, obviously. But that's what my brain thought. But the person I am now, and this is why this was kind of hard for me, is I have decided just to let go and let what's going to happen. And it's so much fun, honestly. It's scary though, but I think Laura, you said something about it's kind of like a game. You don't know which turn is going to happen next, and you just kind of go with it. And I think that's what I've been doing too. But the person I was 2 years ago was not able to do that. That person was I wanted the same job, the same town, I wanted the familiarity. I dated a lot of toxic men because they were familiar to me, even though they weren't really good for me. It was familiar. And I think our brains are just, when the neural pathways are forming, like, we're very young, and so that happens, and we form these beliefs and these patterns even subconsciously. So I think when we go to dive into the unknown and rush into the fear and whatever else, like, we really have to kind of change those neural pathways, and get that stuff to like reform, I guess, if that's making any sense. I don't know. But so I think that's been a big thing for me. Just delving into all of that stuff. I think now I have just, in the last year, I've made the commitment to just let go and follow that guidance, and wherever it leads is going to be okay. I think it was Laura just said, you're going to be okay. It doesn't mean we're not going to have challenges. It doesn't mean things aren't going to be a struggle, and Vicky, I think it was interesting because you mentioned a lot of people, going through these transitions right now. And to get a little woo woo here, if anybody who studies like numerology and like spirituality and all that stuff, we are in a 7-year right now, which is the year of spiritual awakenings. It's the year of change. It's like all of these things going on. So that would make sense why you're seeing that. I don't know. I just think that's very interesting. So, we do have a lot of people going through changes right now, and it's rough when especially when you take divorces and people who have been married for 20 plus years, that's their whole life. And then they have to, I know one of my best friends, she says it was like when the kids got older, they looked at each other and just realized that they had grown apart so much, and so I just think that happens, and then you just have to make that decision on to move forward. And I guess the last thing I'll say with that is change is about growing too. Someone said a quote one time, like, growth never happened from comfort zones or something like that. I don't know who that was, but it comes from rushing into the unknown. And I mean, that really is true. And it's scary, but I think when you can just have faith and follow the intuition and the guidance, then everything is just going to be beautiful.
So Chrissy, before we move on, Chris wrote in on the YouTube live.
Okay.
So he said, yes, this is why I think it's important to go within and examine your own thoughts and values. Most of it is usually unwanted programming. Absolutely wonderful insight, Chrissy.
I'm loving Chris. I like Chris. Hi, Chris. I love it. I love it.
So 2 thumbs up to that for that insight. That's exactly right. That is one of the ways in which the introspection is what helps you get out of that hole. But Chelsea, I want to turn it over to you and get your thoughts on the topic.
Right. So going off of fear, I love fear. I didn't always love fear, but I love fear because it really holds a lot of value when it transcends, right? And I know I don't want to repeat what everyone else was saying a little bit, but so for me, I am personally going through a lot of changes. I feel like I'm always going through a lot of changes, but this year specifically is this huge pivot of this self-love discovery, this self-discovery, loving myself unconditionally and choosing myself. So yeah, I am going through a divorce, but it was a really hard thing. And I remember saying in the past, I was like, if I would have done this a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to. So going through, I knew I was going to be getting a divorce and I knew I was not happy. It wasn't authentically living, but I'm a Taurus. Change is hard and it's hard for anybody, but I could have sat there for a long time struggling with my fear and the fear of change, but I knew it wasn't just a fear of change. It was some insecurities deep within myself that I had to resolve. So I remember sitting down with another fellow life coach, kind of writing a list down of things that I was afraid of. It was, and it was very normal, fear of being a single parent, fear of the unknown. The Virgo in me loves to have a plan. The fear of shame, fear of guilt, guilt for changing, because I had grown and it evolved and I wasn't aligning anymore with my situation. It holds a lot of different emotions. So it's not always just fear. Fear is kind of like what we see, but below it was so much more. And, it's not something that changes overnight. So don't ever stress out over that. It really is baby steps and it's taking one thing at a time and resolving it within yourself. And I'd have to say that's the best thing I've ever done. And that's why I can say I love fear. Because at the end of the day, I love fear because it's challenge accepted a little bit, in my own personal journey. And I would, so I've never, I've written about it, creatively and through my own personal expressions and stuff. But, again, I would not have done what I did a year ago, choosing myself on a very large oomph, right, of change. But the fear really helped me ground into myself. I had to acknowledge why I was afraid, what was going on with the fear, how do I resolve this in myself? And what I realized is after all of this fear changes, I came out a better person. I went through the transitions grounded into myself with no regrets, no if, ands, or buts. I knew, it was a very strong foundation. And I think when we go through fear and changes with fear and we let the fear kind of take the platform and just let it win, it's like very emotional. It's out of control. You're not grounded in yourself. So it's something that I feel like down, at the end of the day, you really have to dig deep and take that fear journey a little bit within yourself. And it leads to a lot of different places. Each person is different, of course, but I think a lot of the times we do share common fears too, and as humans. So we want security. We want something that's comfortable. We're transitioning from something that we thought was comfortable. We're not finding it comfortable anymore. We want to have a change, but we're fear of the change. It is its own battlefield a little bit, but I don't like to view it as a battlefield, but as a self-discovery now. And it's really beautiful. I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, Chelsea, I think you're such a beautiful person. And the more we get to know you, the more depth we see in you. And we're so amazingly proud of you. And honestly, like you're just like this bright sunshine. So thank you for sharing.
You're an inspiration too, Chelsea. I just have to throw that out. You're an inspiration for other people. So it's going to help people. So
you really, really are. So much, wow, so much insight came through and so much of what I wanted to share came through. So, there are a couple of things that I want to pick up on. So we all talked about, why are we afraid of change? And it's the fear of the unknown, right? And the brain likes to have like the things that because that's safety. right? And I remember reading in Joe Dispenza's book, where he writes about breaking the habit of being yourself. He talks about, being able to neurologically embrace change and to embrace the unknown. And he's like, oh my God. And when you let go and you surrender and you are able to just go into the unknown, trusting that everything is going to work out for your highest good, he's like, that's when the true magic begins for you, right? But I think but the question, right? The mind is going to say, but how do I do that? How do I actually overcome it, right? So I will share with you in terms of like the baby steps I went through in my life that helped me overcome fear. And the interesting thing about fear is that the more that you're able to overcome fear on a small level, or maybe for some people, it's like a huge level. For me, it was like overcoming small fears. The more I was able to overcome the bigger fears and really step into my power and step into the person that I was always meant to be. So I'll share my story really quickly. So as I was on this transformation journey, really wanting to like at some point I had to face myself because I was so down, on life. And so I had to start introspecting. So I started journaling and I started writing out a lot. And what was starting to come through is that I had all of these beliefs around like being very limited, very small, what's the definition of good, right? And so at some point I really just had to pause and I had to accept where I was. And I think that when you're going on this transition in life, I think it's okay for you to just accept the fact that you're afraid, right? And not to deny the fact that you're afraid, because so many of us tend to deny and reject that part of us that is like, oh my God, I'm so scared. We tend to maybe overcompensate and say like, oh, I can totally do this. I got this, right? Like, and instead of doing that, I think it's important for us to say like, hey, I am afraid of being a single mom. I am afraid of not knowing whether I will ever meet somebody. I am. And that's okay, because you're at least meeting yourself truthfully and honestly. And if there was anything that was the hardest thing for me to do, that was to meet myself truthfully and honestly, just where I was. So acceptance for me was the hardest part, in all honesty, and placing awareness and being present with whatever was there and whatever was coming up for me. The other thing that I also want to remind everybody is, and Laura, you alluded to this, is you have done hard things before and you've still been okay. And I think that when you're going through that tunnel of fear, you can look back on your life and you can look back and realize that, hey, I have done a lot of hard things and I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I'm still alive. Right. And I loved what Laura said was, you have the choice of how you go through that. Do you go through and struggle and with lots and lots of, sorrow and pain, or do you choose to look through the lens of love or through the lens of fear? And that's what Gabby Bernstein talks so much about, right? And that really struck a chord with me. So I want to remind everybody that you have a choice in this. You have a choice in how you get through this transition in life. And then lastly is, my tip would be is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I'll share some examples of how I got there. So I was at some point running like 6 or 7 miles. And then one day I was like, I'm going to run a half marathon. Now, running a half marathon for somebody who used to be like a small, pudgy little kid was like literally nearly impossible, right? It seemed like an impossible dream, but I started training for it because I said, hey, I want to do this. And the interesting thing is I wasn't doing it for anybody. I was doing it for me because I wanted to prove to me that I could do it. So I went through that little baby tunnel of fear of being able able to run a lot of miles. Then I started trying things that I knew I was horrible at, not the things where I would feel glorious, but the things that I knew I was awful at. So I told you the story about trying pottery, and I couldn't do pottery for the life of me. And the teacher had to sit and babysit me. I started playing tennis. I couldn't play tennis. I couldn't hit the ball. I was shaking on the court, and I knew I was the absolute worst one, but I was overcoming the fear of that shame that I felt for my inability to play tennis. Out of that, when my incident happened in the park and people reached out to me and they were like, Vicky, you need to get out there and you need to start talking and you need to share your voice. I was petrified at creating a video and posting it on YouTube. But you know what? I did it. I was shaking. It took me maybe 55 times to try it. Right. And my videos got like 20 views, but hey, it was a good day. I was like so excited. These are the tunnels of fears that I've had to overcome. I've had to overcome the fear of never, like, I was like, am I never going to get promoted at work? But you know what? Because I was stepping into my power, I was able to raise my hand in life and to step into my own power through these little baby steps to the point where I was able to take bigger leaps in my life, where I felt worthy and deserving of a much bigger job. I doubled my salary with one job hop. And everybody was like, aren't you afraid? And I'm like, no, I got this. Right? Because I was overcoming the fears, but I was also overcoming the limited beliefs about myself. And then I was, and so I have a lot more examples like that. But what I'm trying to say is the more you overcome little baby fears, the less scary it's going to be when life throws you all of these curveballs. And the more you're going to know that you have the power and you have the choice and the ability to overcome it. So I'll pause and I'm going to turn it over to you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know we're probably moving into Q&A. So just a reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll address those. If not, we just keep going. Just raise your hand if you're on Zoom and we'll call on you if you have questions as well. I want to talk a little bit about tools and tips and all these things. I like to call them permission slips to kind of help us get through things. But first, I want to talk about what really happens when we're going through a transition. We are always on some kind of vibrational frequency in life, and the vibrational frequency that we're on is determining our external world and what we're experiencing, or the way that we experience life, as well as the people that are in our life, the places we go, the things we do, the habits we have. And what happens is the winds of change come in because there's a part of you that is supposed to change and grow. You're a part of nature, just like the trees. I won't get into any long stories about nature, but I know that they tried to stop a specific tree from going into hibernation in the winter. They had injected it with some adrenaline, and the trees just ended up dying because what we need to do is actually go through the process as an aspect of nature and go through these energetic changes. Now we're having a real life experience. So our experience is much different than that of the trees. And as far as our consciousness can tell, we're having a very real experience of life. But when the winds of change come in, it pulls us or pushes us to a different vibrational frequency, which is going to be a very different experience of how you're experiencing life. And it's totally normal. We all go through it. Change is actually one of the only constants in our life experience. I could name a few more, but that is the only guarantee in life, is that things are going to change. And so we experience the separation of the old energy. And we can oftentimes find that struggling because we may be releasing some kind of love. So there's always there's always an amount of love in a relationship, even if it's toxic, right? We're releasing some love. We're releasing everything else, but we're releasing some love. And we're taking love away or something like that. But we're also taking the known away. So we're taking the comfort away. We're taking the stagnation away. And so when you're being called to just change your reality and to change your vibration, there's those feelings that come along with that. And that's loneliness. That's the fear, feeling scared, and that's the uncertainty. I remember when uncertainty used to scare me to death. I was like, I need to be certain that I'm going to be okay, but that's not a guarantee. So you almost have to feel comfortable with being uncertain. And of course, then there's our mind will take us into the future, and I like to remind everybody that now is the only moment that exists. So a lot of the times when we're going through these really difficult transitions, we're thinking about the future and we're trying to piece together all of these things that haven't happened yet. And we're taking ourselves out of the now. We're taking ourselves out of the present moment where we can feel the emotions and welcome the pain and comfort ourselves. And so staying present in the now is one of the tips that I like to share with really just bringing yourself into the situation. But then I could give tangible tips. I will always say journaling. I will always say meditation. I'll always say yoga. I will always say move your body. I will always say try new things, just like Vicky said. The other thing that happens when we're moving ourselves through that energy wall is every time you try a new thing, you expand. Every time you try a new thing, you expand because your psyche sees that it's safe and your spirit feels that it's safe and the love for yourself grows. So every time you're trying a new thing, even if you're not good at it, like Vicky said, you're expanding into that vibrational reality that you're supposed to be, or that you're moving into. You're not supposed to be anywhere where aside from where you are right now, but the one that you're moving into. And that can be defined in words like divorce. These are all words that we came up in with society: divorce and death and separation and whatever retirement or whatever you're going through, career changes. But the last tip that I want to share, and it's not going to be super long, but I really feel like we should ask ourselves questions. And some of the questions that I wrote down, just in the time that we were talking about this, was what would happen if we removed all the shame and guilt and fear and uncertainty and all of those low vibrational energies and emotions from the change I'm going through? All of those are just low vibrational things. I'm not saying they're not real, but what if we removed those? So if you journal on that and you say, what if I removed that? What would I be left with? The other question that I had is, can I show up and respond to what shows up for me? Can I just show up to life and show up to today and respond to whatever shows up? So that's a good one to write down. And the other thing that I like to add is to ask yourself, why am I the type of person that deals with change gracefully, with ease? Because that will help identify those parts within you that are there and they're strong and they're capable and they're ready and they can do this, but we kind of lose them sometimes in the mix of all that external noise that we hear. So those are just a few of the tips that I wanted to share, and I'll hand it over to Chrissy, and maybe we can type those questions out somehow in the chat. I'll do that so that you can maybe reflect on those.
That was beautiful. Thank you for all of that. So I think it's funny, when we talk about change, a few years ago, I hated change. Like, I was the person that was like, I'm comfortable. I mean, I'm still kind of like that. I think we all are a little bit, Like, you do get comfortable with certain things, but like, I hated it. And so, and one example I will give though, so this was me a couple years ago. Now it's just like, I can look back on things now and realize that everything was leading up, like everything happens for a reason. Like the change all happened for growth opportunities and for the greater good and all of these things, you know? And so one of the thoughts that was in my head that just popped in there was, you know, I became a nurse in like, I think it was 2011. Yeah, 2011. So we were handwriting notes, charts, the whole 9 yards, right? We went to computer charting, the whole healthcare system went to computerized charting, which was horrible, like the worst transition ever. We all hated it. But had that not happened and the pandemic hit, think about what a mess that would have been. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you were trying to doctor people, and I mean, that's just one example. I feel like when I can look at things that's like at the time they're happening, you know, it's hard sometimes. Like you hate it. It's like, you know, I like, why are we doing this? But then down the road, something happens and you realize it was all for a reason. You know what I mean? And so that was just an example that I had come in my head there for a minute, which that was funny. And the other thing I'll say with that is, it's hard for me to really give practical tips, honestly, other than asking for guidance from like a higher power, because that's my only correlation. Because a couple years ago, like I couldn't. The only way I've been able to deal with change and transitions and being able to let what happens happen is because I meditate and because I just kind of let go. And I just trust that no matter what is going on, you know, that it's all for the greater good. And it usually is. You know what I mean? So I guess my tips are just, I imagine most people here are at least somewhat spiritual, are to ask for the guidance, you know, whoever you want to talk to, whether it's your higher self, you know, God, angels, whatever, and just ask for the, you know, ask for the strength, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, to have faith and to be able to get through it. I mean, that's my biggest tip, I think, for me, because that's what changed my life. So
Nice. I
I'll
love
turn
that.
it over to you now.
I love that. And I guess to build on that, something that I struggled with was what was authentic for me going through the changes and trying to make choices authentically. Was I always struggled with what was protocol, or what I felt society would have said was normal, or how I should have done things. Even like religiously, I grew up in a Baptist church, so like speaking of divorce per se, it's it's not a good thing, and people always would encourage you to do the opposite or try to make it work. Even in like, but this was like, sometimes it's not always a good situation. So something I've just overall as a bird's eye view is to try to tune out a lot of the extra noise, especially if it's not resonating with you, and don't allow it to put pressure on you when you're in some of this fear mode. Because I think when you're in fear mode and you're trying to resolve fear or dissect fear, it has to be authentic to you and what resonates to your soul and what makes sense to your reality or your perception or whatever you're going through. It doesn't matter. The people around us in the world, they will have a million different opinions, right? And at the end of the day, it's overwhelming. And I think it's important to not have anything that extra overwhelms the system, and just really feel yourself through that. Because that's what's important at the end of the day, just as a toolkit. You're not living to make other people happy. You're living to make yourself happy. And, sometimes I think I'm definitely more of a pushover, people pleaser, empathetic a little bit, and I've self-sacrificed myself so much that it really was a bit of a identity crisis a little bit, or, who am I? What do I want? And that really did not mix well with fear and changes. So defining the process of grounding into myself really was tuning out all the extra noise of what people expected from me or whatever they thought things should be, and really just embracing what I wanted. And if it was something unique or different, they maybe never heard of before, it didn't matter. It had to come from my soul. And I think that's important for anybody going through change. That's how we ground into ourselves too, a little bit. It has to be authentic. If it's not authentic, you're going to continue questioning it and probably have still some fear laying in the background a tad bit. So I'll leave that at that. So we have time for questions too, but yeah,
I
it's
love that.
important.
I'm going to quickly read some comments on the YouTube channel. I'll share one final tip, and then let's open it up to Q&A. So some of the comments that we got, Chris, you're so participatory. You're
I love it, Chris.
Thank
love it.
Thank you. So let me quickly read out what he's shared. So thank you for the tips, Laura. I think journaling is powerful because it allows us to open our mind to new ways of thinking and seeing things from different perspectives. I think it would also be possible to try and embody a state where you have no expectations, just let go, like you said, and allow whatever happens to happen. This will put you receptive to flow states, or being in the present moment with openness because you've let go of expectations and assumptions about what may happen. And then to Chelsea, he said, true, Chelsea, something a friend told me is that people don't pay your bills. So why their opinion of you go rent? So why their opinions of you go rent free? It's so silly, but true. But that kind of thinking can be egotistical, because ego loves self-gain. I love that. Thank you, Chris. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yes, we love the participation, right? From Chris. I love it. I love it.
It's great. One last thing that I want to say is one of the two questions that really helped me as I was going through my journey was this. One was journaling on the questions of who am I? Who am I? And asking it open-endedly. And I would meditate on that. And then I would write out, who am I? After a meditation. And the second question that also really helped me throughout my journey was I would meditate, and I would meditate on the question and reflect on the question of what do I want my life to feel like? Not to be like, not what am I going to have? Am I going to have big houses and expensive cars? No. What do I want my life to feel like? And I remember answering it, I want to wake up happy. I want to wake up excited, doing something that I truly love. I want to be surrounded by people that I genuinely enjoy, whose company I genuinely enjoy, who are smart, who are, right? Everybody is going to have a different definition or an emotion attached to what they want their life to feel like. But this is a feeling universe. This is a feeling universe. And that's why if you're going through change and you're going through transition, ask yourself, what do I want my life to feel like? And feel into that life and trust that the universe, the all that is going to fill in all the details for you. But feel into that life. So I stop there. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add, but I'm very passionate about that question because that question is what really got me through. Let's open it up to Q&A, to comments. Do you guys on YouTube? On YouTube, we have more participants who are joining. So welcome to our masterclass. We've been going through and sharing some of the wisdom and experiences and questions that you could be asking yourself as you're going through this journey. And anybody on Zoom, if you have questions, we open this up to you.
I will add.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to say, I will add, while we're waiting for any questions to come through, we kind of touched upon it on our like pre-little meeting before we jumped on here, is that we really do believe what we tell ourselves all the time. So what are we telling ourselves about the experience of change and transition and what you're going through? Like you're going to believe it. You believe everything that you tell yourself about yourself and about the experience that you're going through. And the second thing is that Vicky touched upon, and I wrote down to mention it, is that we are in a feeling world. But we also need to consider and ask yourself the question, if you're feeling your thoughts, if you're experiencing your thoughts, what if I'm experiencing all my thoughts as feelings? Because that will help you find some kind of clarity and power in the thoughts as well, and kind of help you determine what kind of experience you want to make out of it. And just in my life, like I said, everything that was very hard for me to get through at the end, I was like, thank goodness that happened. I'm like so thankful that the things that happened, because I grew, I expanded, I stepped into a new version of myself. And I say this all the time, none of us would be here if we didn't do that. And looking back and giving ourselves grace and praise for what we have gotten through is a good reminder. I remember I said, if I was 1% better every day, I would be happy, or even if I can't even count the percentage, if it was just a fraction, I'm happy with that. And so if you could just see a fraction of a little bit of a better, life experience for yourself, then you're doing really well. So I just wanted to add that.
I love
Yeah.
that. So we did get a question on YouTube. So the question is, how do you process the meaning of life? Like, what is our purpose of being here? Will we ever know? Perhaps we create our own meaning of life. I've had an existential crisis a few weeks ago. It was terrifying at first. That is a question I had. Interested to hear your inputs.
I feel like we should do a
I-
whole topic on that.
I love it.
I love this
The
question,
deep
Chris.
thought. I love it. Okay. I
And
love that.
And more people are joining our live on YouTube. So welcome to
Oh,
everybody.
wow. Okay. Yeah.
joining. So I love this question. Do we want to delve into it a little bit at least?
Yeah.
And Chris, I think you're inspiring an entire topic. So if you don't mind, we might steal it. Steal the question and do an entire masterclass around that. But let's not leave Chris hanging. Let's start to answer that. Who wants to go first? What is the meaning of life? The ultimate question. How do you process the meaning of life? Like, what is our purpose of being here? Will we ever know? Perhaps we create our own meaning of life.
I love that. Can I go first? Is that okay?
Yes,
She's
please
ready.
do.
Yeah.
I love this. This is what we talk about a lot in my dream analysis sessions, because it brings up a lot of deep topics, not just on a self-discovery, but even like a metaphysical whole concept. And at the end of the day, it is a good question. And I love how you said, like, we could create our own meaning, because we do that. And that's the beautiful thing. It's kind of this blank slate a little bit, but we're also souls. And as I always say, identify as a soul, right? And that gives it a very large perspective outside of just one life. And I think that's important. So when we're doing like a self-discovery or a soul discovery, I like to call it a soul discovery, we do battle a lot of these topics. And it's different for each person, but at the end of the day, it does kind of resonate in the same spaces of a soulness of us. We are here really to experience ourselves and our emotions and everything that comes with it. And there's no right or wrong way to do that. Good, bad, ugly. It's all beautiful, and it all comes together on a big picture. So it's something I really enjoy discussing with my clients, because each person's unique and the question comes through their own experiences and curiosity, but it all leads to the same spot a little bit. We're all souls experiencing ourselves. And I love it. So after a couple of years of my self-discovery and kind of finding this soul journey about myself, I could say I'm confidently existing in this life as a soul, no ifs, ands, or buts. And that is why I can look from a third eye view instead of a bird eye view. I call it a third eye view of where I'm really at with my experiences, and to be able to take some with a grain of salt, to take some as lessons. I think when we view ourselves on that larger scale, we're able to comprehend a lot more depthness of a question like that. Because I mean, at the end of the day, when I went through my awakening phases, I was struggling with depression really bad. And those were the things I wanted to know too. I wanted to know the world truths. I wanted to know why I existed. What was the point of this whole ordeal in the first place? You know, it really leads you to a lot of places. Um, it's absolutely beautiful. So even if you're not sure to how to answer that within yourself yet, that is part of the journey, literally. And it's a beautiful space to be in, even when you're in the confusion. Like I think I wrote about it in my book a little bit, which is poetical, but it was the first chapter was confusion. And it really leads somewhere. So like let it do its thing. Because at the end of the day, it really leads to a beautiful place. And I'll leave it at that and let everyone else chime in.
Who wants to jump in next?
I'll jump in. I always like to jump into these questions. So I agree with you 100%, Chelsea. Imagine, if you will, I've already talked about how now is the only moment. Now is the only moment. The past and the future, they're real experiences. Time is a real experience. But I told Vicky once, I can't pay you $1 million to be anywhere else but right now. Like, even if you would, even if that exchange were possible, like, it's not possible. You're always now. Even now, we're in the same, we're in now. So imagine that the universe itself wants to experience itself. So now there's 8 billion people, 8 billion souls out there experiencing the same moment of now from a different perspective. That's the meaning of life, is that experience. And we're all having our own experience. And that's why good and bad doesn't really exist. It's because it's all on that the scale of experience and vibrational frequencies. And, lower negative energies feel bad and higher negative energies feel good. But at the end of the day, the meaning that we give our lives is what we give to it. It's essentially meaningless, meaning I can give my life a really happy, joyful meaning, or I can give my life a very sad and low vibrational meaning. It's really up to me, depending on what I choose, because we have free will. So the other thing is that being that experience is the meaning of life. We are souls having a spiritual experience along with this ego part of us. It's the combination, but our spirit will always exist. But this version of us right here, who I am right now, will cease to exist in this physical reality sometime. Now, right now, I'm here, I'm experiencing, I'm creating, I'm living through free will. I'm trying to do my best at living my best life. I am living my best life because I'm very determined to do that. But remembering that this version of me and this experience of me will cease to exist almost gives me even more reason to do more, to experience more, to want to get out there, because time is, we don't have a ton of time. So as far as processing the meaning to what you want to give to that is going to be processing the meaning that you give to that, because two poor people can have two very different experiences of life, just as two wealthy people can have two very different experiences of life, because they're giving it different meanings. So to answer your question, Chris, that was a great question. I love it. And we may be do a topic on that eventually, but it's the meaning that you give to it. It's your choice.
Yeah, I wrote it down as a topic here. I jotted it down. I figured we'd have to at some point, right?
Yeah. I guess the only thing I'll add, and everything that you ladies have said is so profound. I think that, I remember as I was going through my journey, I was like, well, what's my purpose? What's my mission? What's my purpose? Right? Like, I think that that's like such a big question, and especially in like the spiritual world, right? Like, what's my purpose? And the thing is, you are on purpose. That's it. Like, every moment is on purpose. That's your purpose, right? Like, and because I was like looking for like, oh, like, am I here to like save the world? I'm being a little facetious, but like, like, oh, I'm like, whatever, right? But the thing is, this very moment, this now moment is on purpose. And so when people ask, well, why am I here? And what's my purpose for being here? You being here is the purpose, right? The other thing that I also wanted to add is one of the things that also struck me as I was going through my awakening is that we live in a world of paradox, right? It's a world of paradox. And so if you think about the universe, it's the all thing and the no thing, right? That's a paradox. And I remember being really interested in, well, is there destiny or is there free will? Like, which is it? Like, did God already define what my life is going to be? Or am I going to choose what that life is going to be? And the God will never interfere, right? Because like you kind of grow up with that dogma, right?
Mhm.
And so, but that too is a paradox, right? It's both. It's both, right? Your soul experiences itself and it brings the experiences, but then this has the free will to choose. And going back to where we started, you have these experiences, and maybe these experiences that you're going through that might be mired in fear, you have the choice of how you experience it. And you have the free will of whether you're going to see it through the lens of love or through the lens of fear. And so that's the paradox, I think, of life. And this whole life is a paradox, you know? And so that's my only maybe nugget that I could add to what has already been said. So Chris, you are on purpose, my friend. You are on purpose. Every moment you live and breathe is on purpose. Okay, so he's writing back. Do you want me to read a little bit of the comments? Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you so much, True. Let me see where true time is the psychological aspect. So it's like the universe is being able to experience itself in a subjective matter. Well, it can be subjective if we like. Enlightened beings, it's a state of consciousness we all have access to, live in an objective experience, see life as it is. And then he said, Buddha was searching for purpose. He discovered that existence itself can be a purpose, the same way religious parties find purpose in God. God can mean purpose in different wording, and that's beautiful.
I'm loving that. Love it. I love the participation. It's great.
Chris, you're awesome. Thank
Thank you, Chris. I want to do a talk called free will and destiny. I don't know if we'll have enough to cover that whole thing, but you know, I feel like that would be a great one to add.
Oh yeah, we could probably keep going on this subject for a while, I imagine. Yeah.
It makes me feel good because I was working on questions that had to do with like dream analysis or like topics, and I was getting into some deep stuff, and I was like, "Ooh, should I be even?" So this is perfect. Let's get deep.
Well, yeah,
The answer is yes.
Deep is good. I think we talked about that a little bit amongst ourselves about like how like spiritual do we want to go and how much do we want to delve into, and I think we kind of weren't sure. So I love it.
It's a natural evolution.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions you'd love to ask, or even go live and, you know, get free coaching? You know, we're here for you. We're here to be in service of you. I'm looking if there's anything else on YouTube live. If you guys don't mind, submit what topics you would love for us to cover next, because we're always looking for your input on that. So if you have any suggestions on what you'd love to get answers to, or a topic you'd love for us to cover, we would love to do that for you guys.
Yeah. Also, don't forget to turn in emails if you want a free coaching session from anybody. And a reminder, I got to go here in a few minutes to catch another appointment, but turn your email in if you would like. We do have some free coaching options.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea.
Every Wednesday. So I hope you guys will come back and join us every Wednesday, same time.
Yeah, so the way the coaching works, just like Chelsea said, just put your email in the chat. And we just draw an email and then we message you, and you get to choose a free session with any of us. So it's a really good opportunity to get some guidance and some support in what you're going through.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So back on the topic a little bit, I know that we're kind of talking about tools and stuff, and we only have a few minutes. But Vicky, do you have any other, I was also thinking maybe breathing exercises. Breathing exercises is something that we can always do. Obviously, grounding meditations. I feel like part of our challenge as energetic beings and is that we have a hard time grounding sometimes. This is where anxiety, PTSD, this is where a lot of those symptoms come from, is because we are energetic, and the energy that we're trying to process, it doesn't have a ground wire, or it can't get through our system properly, and we can't release it. And so that's when the symptoms of transition and change can get really uncomfortable, is when we're having those anxiety and the energy going through the mind and like causing havoc, when in reality that energy either doesn't belong in your body, or it belongs in your heart center, or focused into another chakra. So my question for you, Vicky, is do you have like any other tools before we leave that you can say that you could recommend for other people, besides what we've already given, for them to do while they're, because there's that depth of like, I know that I'm going to get through this. I know that it's okay. I know, like, there's that intellectual knowing, and then there's like, but I need something to help me make it more peaceful as I go through it. So what can you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different things. One is I go out in nature. I just go out for a walk in fresh air. That just does wonders for me personally. Grounding yourself, being one with nature really helps. Also, just becoming present and still with where you're at. So observing the sky or observing the trees. Excuse me, I have a
Still got the cough. You're fine.
Oh my God, I've been so sick.
You good over there?
Excuse me. So that really helps. I listen to binaural beats, if anybody's familiar with that. Are you guys familiar with binaural beats at all?
Yeah, I actually have that. It's an app that I have on my phone. I think it's sound waves, and actually Chris mentioned that sound therapy is epic. I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, binaural beats. I know they said like use it with headphones so that you can get like the frequencies. Yeah, I did that myself too. So
it really, really helps. I'm actually developing an entire course with mindfulness and how to use brainwave entrainment to help with anxiety, with sleep disorders, with so many different things. But if you're feeling anxious, the binaural beat that you want to listen to is low beta. So you want to listen to either low beta or theta, because there are 5 brainwave states. And so you want the lower and the slower brainwave states. So delta brainwave state helps you go to sleep. Then you've got theta. After that, theta is what really gets you into that very spiritual mode. And then after that comes beta. And so you want to listen to the low beta and alpha brainwave states, and that really helps with anything that you're experiencing with anxiety. That really helps calm your nervous system, and as little as even 10 minutes. So what I do is I actually combine the two. So I'll listen to binaural beats in my headphones with just like beautiful music overlaid it, because just listening to the sound is really hard. So get something that has like really nice melody to it with binaural beats infused in there. And then also going for like a 10-minute walk while listening to it. It really calms me down, but also becoming super present in the moment, even such as like, sometimes I just observe the leaves, and as they just like, move in with the wind, because that just refocuses your mind and gets it off of, the anxiety that is coming up within your energetic body. So those are my tips. There's also like tapping that you could do. And I know, Chrissy, you could speak to
mention that
so
one. Yeah.
tapping like over here in between your pinky and your fourth finger, your ring finger, also on the side here. You can tap on your temples, depending on what is coming up for you. But tapping, it's also referred to as EFT, is incredibly effective when it comes to anything that is anxiety. And I actually think, Laura, we should do and Chrissy, we should do an entire topic on managing anxiety and stress.
I
How
was
do you
thinking the
feel
same
about
thing.
that topic? Okay.
And tapping too. I think we need to do the tapping live with, because I've done it. I'm sure you've done it, and it literally works every time. It works for everything. I've done it for pain, anxiety, guilt, everything. And it always brings it down. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a little tapping, the thymus, and the bones on your shoulders here, and then underneath your eyes and the top of the forehead. Yeah. So there's a little system that you can learn. And when you're experiencing anxiety and you're just like, you need something to give you a moment of peace, that is a really good one. They've also found that obviously being in nature, like Vicky said, I did a ton of walking in the woods that helped me heal back in when I used to do a lot of backpacking. But now I navigate to the water. But they found studies that there is something that happens within us just by seeing the water. So going to the water is helpful. And then also connection with people. So everybody that's hopped on here, I am so proud that you're here, because when we go through hard times, we tend to withdraw, and I think that's okay. But you have to make sure that you're not withdrawing to the point to where you're going into like a deeper tunnel, because it can be really hard to crawl back out of that. So being with people and connecting with people that you love and trust, and hopping on these things with us weekly will at least give you a sense of community and someone to connect with, because you're here with us, and connection is something that actually, I think of all things in the world, that's what I love most. And I think that's why we love, impact, but connection with other people. We're all one, right? So we want to experience everybody being here together in this community. So that's another thing. Even if it hurts you to like go to your neighbor's house or call your friend, you're like, just do it and get yourself out of isolation, because we do tend to isolate. But if you're doing it because you actually need space, just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and then not for too long. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to add with the walking in nature too. Also, if you can go barefoot, that's always been great with me. Like I go out in the grass barefoot, and that really helps ground me. So
I actually
Yes.
read that any nature, even like if you're on the sand barefoot, I love that point, Chrissy. So barefoot in sand and water, in like a natural body of water, barefoot is also really, really good. Grass. So that's a great point. Sometimes sometimes I take my dog and I just sit under a tree, but like without even like a blanket between me and the tree, and I just sit under it, and I really feel its roots, and I feel the nature under me, and it's so healing. And I meditate under a tree in the shade. Super, super healing. Nature is just healing. We are nature.
And we are. I want to add one more thing to the whole list too. Also, something that's really helped me is we all talk about affirmations, but I mean, like as soon as you're waking up in the morning, just saying to yourself, whatever it is you need to say, whether it's technology is my friend, or whether it's, I'm loved, I'm grateful, whatever it is. When you do that, and especially if you can like look in the mirror, and that's even more powerful, like it does change your brain waves, and it really gets you in a different mindset. So very helpful.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Some other things that now that we're like, now I can't stop on this. So sometimes before going into like a meeting that is high stress, or like that could be a little like, where I'm kind of like, oh God, I'm surrounded by so many leaders, and I'm like this little person, right? Like we all have those moments, right? Let's get human.
Uh-huh.
So what I'll do is I'll actually get into a power pose, and I'll just go like that, right? And I open up my area just to like, it's amazing the body mind connection, right? And when you need to just feel a little bit more in, like, with yourself. So like sometimes I'll just go like that, and I just try to open myself up and open up my space so that I'm not as nervous or feeling so little. Because like I said in the very beginning, I really struggled with feeling like I'm such a little person, like who little me, like do I really deserve to be here? So when something like that comes up for me, that's when I try to like really open myself up and feel bigger.
Have you ever tried the super like power pose? Or yeah, they say that's powerful too. I've never done it really yet.
I know it sounds so stupid and so silly.
It's like
It really helps. But like if you're
That's
feeling
good though.
if you're feeling anxious, I wonder if those are the things that can also help, in those moments to reconnect with yourself and to remember that you're bigger than this 1 minute, that you're experiencing this anxiety. So let's do a whole topic on this. I think
I'm writing it down.
But I have another one. Oh, body mind connection.
Go.
I'm loving this.
Those are coming.
Okay, so now I think the master class is over. We're just having fun, as you can see.
We're just chatting.
Are you guys getting any benefit from? Oh, it's funny. The YouTube numbers also went down. I think people are like, all right, I think it's over. So I hope you guys are finding this helpful, and that you've learned something, and that you learned what you came here to learn. I hope that's, that you got what you were looking to get out of this.
And Bonnie, thank you again for being here with us and even being on camera. Like that I mean, a lot of people do not like to be on camera. It takes a lot to get on here. Yep. So I commend you. Thank you.
Yes, and we're here every Wednesday. Next week, we're going to be talking about relationships. So Chrissy's going to kind of take the lead on her topics, and then we basically do the same thing. We just give our experiences and our tips and just some things, relationship with yourself, relationship with other people. I'll send out an email. I'm not sure how you heard about us, Bonnie, but we'll send out an email just giving the specifics on the topic. So that's what we've chosen, though, is it's going to be about relationships. So
yes,
yeah, that's what we're going to do. So all right, ladies.
I think
we're
that's
good.
a wrap. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, Chris, you definitely get a gold star for participation. Bonnie, you get a gold star for participation. You have been amazing. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome, awesome, awesome. And thank you for being part of this community. We are so delighted to have you here. And we're doing this again next Wednesday. And guess what? Chrissy is going to be the one who's going to be leading us with her beautiful insights on relationships. And I can't wait to dig into that topic with you, my friend. Okay. All right, guys.
All right.
Have an
See y'all next week. Bye.
Hey, bye, everyone.
Bye. And the live stream is going to be recorded and streaming on the YouTube channel in case you want to come back and rewatch any parts of it. Okay. All right.
And invite your friends. Have them all come.
Yes.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.